The gavel struck. Sharp. Final. Cold. "All rise," the bailiff said. But no one moved. Not because they were disrespectful. Not because they didn't hear. But because they couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Judge Ruth Alderman had just dismissed the case, with a smirk. And 5 words. "Black boys lie for sport." Gasps swept across the courtroom like a sudden wind. The mother of the teen plaintiff clutched her son's hand tighter. The attorney stammered, trying to respond. The boy, 16, honor student, accused of shoplifting with no evidence, just stared straight ahead. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He'd heard it all before. But never from someone wearing a robe. A federal robe. Judge Alderman leaned back in her chair like she'd done nothing wrong. Like this was normal. And to her, maybe it was. She was new to the bench. A recent appointee. But in just 3 weeks, her courtroom had become a theater of humiliation, if your skin happened to be black or brown. The defense attorney, a young black woman named Carmen Lewis, stood frozen. She had argued the case flawlessly. The store's own footage showed her client had done nothing. The charge should have been dismissed in the first 5 minutes. Instead, it had dragged on for 2 days. Every objection she made, overruled. Every motion she filed, denied. But the moment that sealed it wasn't in the transcript. It was that 5-word line. Spoken not in anger, but in confidence. Like it was fact. Like it was funny. Carmen glanced across the courtroom. No reporter had been there. No camera crew. Just another day in a small southern town. Just another courtroom. But something was different this time. In the back rows sat a man in uniform. Not a police officer. Not a bailiff. Not a bodyguard. An older black man, quiet still. Wearing a simple gray suit. With a golden pin on his lapel. He said nothing. Didn't react. But his eyes locked on the judge the moment those words were spoken. Carmen didn't know who he was. Not yet. But she felt it. The shift in the room. The silent tension in the air. And the judge? She didn't notice at all. She just picked up her gavel. Smirked. And stood up. "Court is adjourned," she said. No justice. No apology. Just a final insult echoing between the walls. As people began to file out, angry, stunned, helpless, the boy's mother whispered, "We knew she'd never listen." But the man in the gray suit stayed seated. Didn't move. Didn't blink. He was already thinking. Calculating. Because Judge Alderman had just made the biggest mistake of her short judicial career. She thought she was untouchable. She thought no one was watching. She thought wrong. The next morning, courtroom 2B was packed. Not because of a high-profile case. Not because of media coverage. But because word had spread. Quietly. Relentlessly. "Did you hear what she said? That new judge? Ruth Alderman? Said black boys lie for sport?" By 8:30 a.m., the benches were full. Even the hallway buzzed with whispered outrage. But inside, Judge Alderman sat calm, composed, sipping her coffee like it was any other day. Like she hadn't just shattered the last ounce of trust the black community had in the justice system. She glanced at the docket. Today's case? A landlord-tenant dispute. A black mother of 3 versus a wealthy white property owner. Of course. Carmen Lewis was there again, representing the mother. She didn't want to come back. Not after yesterday. But her client begged. "No one else will help me," the woman had whispered. "They all say it's a lost cause." Carmen didn't believe in lost causes. Not until she walked back into that courtroom. "Case 2087, Simmons vs. Thurwell," the bailiff called. Carmen rose. Her client beside her. A worn-out mother, eyes hollow from night shifts and eviction threats. Across the aisle, the landlord adjusted his tie, cocky, smug. And his lawyer? Smirking already. They'd been in this courtroom before. They knew who sat on that bench now. Judge Alderman tapped her gavel. "Let's make this quick," she said, already bored. Carmen began calmly, presenting the evidence: unpaid maintenance, broken heating, mold, photos, documentation. She wasn't emotional, just precise. She laid the facts bare. The judge didn't look up once. But when the landlord's lawyer stood and simply shrugged, "Your Honor, this is just another tenant who doesn't want to pay rent." Judge Alderman nodded. That was it. No questions. No review. She ruled in favor of the landlord. Immediate eviction. Gasps. Again. The mother's knees buckled. "Please, Your Honor, I have children." "You should have thought of that before withholding rent," Judge Alderman snapped. Carmen stepped forward. "Your Honor, we can file a stay. There are children involved. Federal law gives us." Alderman's gavel slammed hard. "Enough. I've heard enough of your kind arguing loopholes." Your kind. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The intent was as clear as daylight. Another ripple of silence. Then, from the back of the courtroom, the same man from yesterday rose. This time, he walked forward. Not fast. Not loud. But with purpose. Carmen saw him and stepped aside. "Sir," the bailiff warned, "you need to remain seated." "I just have one question," the man said, pulling a small notepad from his pocket. "And who are you to interrupt my courtroom?" the judge barked. He smiled. Calm. Measured. "Isaiah Harlan. Civil Rights Oversight Committee." The smirk on Judge Alderman's face faltered. Slightly. "I'm just observing." "Please carry on." He returned to his seat. But the mood had changed. The silence grew heavier. The temperature dropped. Alderman tried to keep control. She slammed the gavel again, this time harder. "This courtroom is not open to public commentary or performance." But it didn't work. Because by now, everyone could see it. She was shaken. Outside, people began whispering. Inside, Carmen pulled her client aside. "Do you know who that man is?" she asked quietly. The mother shook her head. Carmen's voice was low, careful. "He's not just on the Civil Rights Committee. He used to run it. He helped write the guidelines for judicial ethics enforcement." The mother's eyes widened. "You mean, he's here to investigate her?" Carmen just nodded. And that day, Judge Alderman made it worse. Not just by ruling unfairly, but by doubling down. She issued a new rule: no pro bono attorneys allowed without prior written approval. No one had ever heard of that. It wasn't legal. It wasn't standard. But she signed it. Posted it. Within days, 3 more cases, all involving black families, were rushed through her docket and denied. 3 evictions. 2 custody disputes. 1 wage theft case thrown out. Each time, the same cold face. The same dismissive tone. And each time, Isaiah Harlan sat. Watched. Took notes. By the end of the week, Carmen couldn't stay silent. She filed a formal complaint. Not anonymously. Not quietly. With her name, her law license, and her voice. The courthouse tried to ignore it. Until Monday morning, when Isaiah returned. Not alone this time. 2 men in dark suits followed. And this time, they weren't silent observers. They sat front row. Right in front of Judge Ruth Alderman's bench. And when she walked in, she froze for just half a second. But it was enough. Because Judge Alderman had gone too far. She thought the robe would protect her. She thought her words wouldn't travel. She thought justice was just perspective. But she was about to learn. Some things echo louder than a gavel. Monday. 10:03 a.m. 3 minutes late. Judge Alderman stormed into the courtroom with fire in her eyes and steel in her step. She hated being watched. And today, she knew she was. 2 men in suits. Federal looking. No introduction. No smiles. They'd simply handed her clerk a sealed envelope and took their seats. Front row. Crossed arms. Stone faces. She knew exactly what it was. An inquiry. But she wasn't scared. Not yet. She'd been untouchable all her life. Daddy was a senator. Her uncle ran a law firm that had donated generously to the governor's campaign. The robe she wore? A gift wrapped in politics. So no, she wasn't scared. She was angry. And someone had to pay. Case 3024, the state versus Anthony Green, the bailiff called. The courtroom tensed. Carmen Lewis stood again. This time, next to a young black man, mid-20s, athletic build, nervous eyes. Anthony Green had been accused of resisting arrest. No body cam footage. No dashboard video. Just an officer's word. And bruises on Anthony's face. Carmen had filed a suppression motion. A strong one. With precedent, timelines, and medical records. It didn't matter. Judge Alderman didn't even let her finish. This court has heard enough, she snapped. But Your Honor, I haven't presented my argument. Overruled. You haven't even reviewed. Motion denied. The prosecutor smirked. The two men in suits? Still silent. Still watching. Carmen clenched her jaw. She looked at Anthony. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded. Barely. And Judge Alderman smiled. Just a little. That's when she went further. Mr. Green, she said, I am recommending your bail be revoked. Your behavior suggests a continued threat to law enforcement. There was a pause. Even the prosecutor looked up, confused. No one had asked for that. No one expected that. Carmen stood, her voice loud now. That's retaliatory and baseless. Bail revoked. The gavel slammed. Two officers moved in. Anthony flinched. No! Carmen shouted, stepping between them. You can't do this. He hasn't even been tried. Judge Alderman leaned forward. Would you like to be held in contempt, counselor? Carmen didn't blink. Do it. The courtroom gasped. Judge Alderman hesitated. For the first time all week. Because Carmen wasn't bluffing. She was daring her. And that hesitation? That single moment of indecision? It cracked the mask. Carmen turned, addressing the courtroom. Her voice firm. Controlled. Loud enough for every ear. This judge has denied every black defendant due process. She has disregarded evidence, silenced counsel, and now, she's punishing someone for filing a legal motion. Judge Alderman's face turned red. Bailiff, remove her from my courtroom. But the bailiff didn't move. Instead, one of the men in suits stood. He reached into his coat. Not for a weapon. For a badge. He walked forward and placed it on the bench. Judge Alderman, he said calmly, you are being formally notified that an investigation into judicial misconduct has been initiated under Title 28, Section 351. She froze. Your actions today will be included in the report. The silence was deafening. Judge Alderman sat back slowly. Tried to regain her composure. This is outrageous, she hissed. Political. Unjustified. But no one believed her. Not anymore. Carmen helped Anthony to his feet. The officer stepped back. And the man in the suit leaned closer. You might want to read that envelope, Judge, he said. We'll be in touch. He turned. And walked out. So did Carmen. So did the crowd. But the judge? She stayed frozen in her chair. Still gripping her gavel. Still trying to control something that was already lost. She had pushed too far. Too fast. She thought the robe made her invincible. She thought fear was enough to silence the room. She thought wrong. And tomorrow? Tomorrow the cameras would come. Tuesday. The courthouse steps were a battlefield. Reporters swarmed. Cameras rolled. Microphones stretched like bayonets toward any official who dared walk past. And in the middle of it all, Carmen Lewis stood tall. Calm. But not silent. She didn't hold back. She spoke about Judge Alderman's rulings. Her words. Her smirk. Her pattern. And behind her, dozens of citizens, black, white, Latino, stood in quiet solidarity. Some with signs. Most with stories. All of them tired. Tired of being silenced. Ignored. Judged before speaking. Inside, Judge Alderman paced her chambers. The letter had been read. The phone calls made. No answers. No reassurances. Even her father, Senator Alderman, had only offered one sentence. Fix it quietly, Ruth. We're too close to re-election. But there was no quiet anymore. By noon, 3 national outlets had picked up the story. Civil rights attorneys were calling. Old case files reopened. And someone else was watching. From a quiet office in D.C., the man in the gray suit reviewed every minute of courtroom footage. Isaiah Harlan. He hadn't always been this quiet. He'd once been a firebrand. A courtroom warrior. A name whispered in Senate halls with both fear and admiration. But now, he chose silence. Observation. Timing. Because time reveals everything. At 3:12 p.m., he made the call. To the ethics board. To the media. To someone very specific. An old friend. One who owed him. Wednesday morning, Judge Alderman returned to the bench. A different energy this time. No cameras. No crowd. Just silence. Until the double doors opened. And in walked a woman in uniform. Military-grade posture. Sharp eyes. Black heels clicking with finality. She wasn't there for a case. She was there for her father. Anthony Green's father. Colonel Patrice Green. Retired JAG. 28 years in service. Medal recipient. Now, senior investigator for the Department of Defense Civil Justice Unit. And she wasn't alone. Behind her, Isaiah Harlan. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Because Colonel Green walked straight to the front and addressed the court. This bench is compromised, she said, voice like a blade. I am here under federal authority to observe and document any further proceedings until the Ethics Commission renders its preliminary findings. Judge Alderman stood, furious. This is my courtroom. No, ma'am, Colonel Green cut in. This is the people's courtroom. And today, the people are watching. The bailiff looked to the judge. Hesitated. Carmen, watching from the gallery, let a small breath escape. And then, Isaiah stepped forward. He pulled a small black binder from his coat. Laid it gently on the bench. Inside, he said softly, you'll find 15 documented rulings. 12 of which disproportionately harmed black litigants. 3 of which included language now under federal review. Judge Alderman didn't touch it. Couldn't. Isaiah stepped back. We're not here to humiliate you, Judge Alderman. We're here because the law demands accountability. For a moment, just one, she looked human. Not powerful. Not confident. Just exposed. She sat. Didn't speak. Didn't smirk. And Carmen knew. The tide had turned. This woman, this judge, who had held power like a sword, was now under it. And justice? Justice was no longer a dream whispered in the hallway. It was standing in the room. In uniform. In silence. In truth. Friday morning. 8:45 a.m. Judge Alderman's parking space was empty. Inside courtroom 2B, a different kind of silence settled. Not heavy. Not tense. But expectant. The bench sat vacant. The gavel untouched. The seal of justice behind it seemed brighter somehow. People filled the seats. Quiet. Watching. And at exactly 9 a.m., the doors opened. Isaiah Harlan walked in. Calm. Dignified. Followed by a clerk from the Judicial Conduct Commission. She carried a folder. And a microphone. She stepped to the front, cleared her throat, and read. Effective immediately, Judge Ruth Alderman is suspended pending full investigation into judicial misconduct under federal and state guidelines. All of her recent rulings are now under review. A beat. Then applause. Not loud. Not wild. Just steady. A rhythm of relief. Of release. In the back row, Carmen Lewis sat with Anthony Green and his father. She didn't clap. She just nodded. Because she knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something better. At noon, Ruth Alderman walked out of the courthouse for the last time as a sitting judge. No robe. No gavel. No reporters rushing to praise. Just questions. Flashbulbs. And 1,000 eyes watching. She didn't smirk. Not this time. Because the world had seen her. Heard her. Judged her. And found her guilty. Of bias. Of cruelty. Of forgetting what that bench was built for. But this story wasn't really about her. It was about the people who stood up when others sat down. It was about Carmen Lewis, who refused to be silenced. About Anthony Green, who stood tall even in handcuffs. About Colonel Patrice Green, who walked in with truth and left with justice. And about Isaiah Harlan, who watched, waited, and acted. Because justice doesn't always arrive in a roar. Sometimes it comes in a whisper. Sometimes in a folder. Sometimes in a simple line from a government clerk. You are hereby removed. Weeks later, a new judge took the bench in courtroom 2B. Her name was Judge Maya Thornton. First black woman to sit on that bench in county history. Her first ruling? She overturned 3 of Alderman's cases. Justice, she said, isn't about power. It's about people. And in the hallway, Carmen smiled. Because the gavel no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like what it always should have been. A tool. To build. To protect. To set things right. And justice? It had finally come home. She thought the robe made her untouchable. She thought wrong. Justice doesn't care what you wear, only what you do.